let's talk about files, how to operate with files, how to read files and how to write into files. We start with reading the files. We can treat file basically as a string. It's a lot of text. There can be line breaks, then there can be numbers, there can be different symbols and so on. So to operate with the file, we have to open it first. And to read it, we open it for reading. And then we can, for example, read every line separately, or we can read the whole contents in one command, basically. And in the next examples, we will use the given file. So we have different numbers here separated by space, and also we have two different lines of input. And we will have all those examples done with the same file. So to read lines from the file, we can use read line method from file object. So I will talk about this with command later on, but currently we can say that this first line opens the file. The file name is numbers.txt, and the open file is put into f variable. And from this f variable we can call different methods, for example, read line. And what happens here is that the first line is read into line variable and the second one is read into line 2 variable. And I've also commented here how those variables or the values of those variables look alike. So the first one has 1, 2, 3, 4, and the second one has 5, 6, 7, and 8. You can see that there is this line break or \n. This is a special symbol which indicates the line break. So that's the thing with Python file reading and writing, that those line breaks are also part of the file. And if I read a line, this line break is also a part of this line. But I will show you that later on. So we can also read the whole file in one command, and here we just use a method read. And as you can see, the whole file contents are stored into this contents variable. And also the line break is also shown here. So this is basically one symbol which indicates the line break. So we have also different ways to read lines. So for example, there's a read lines method, which gives us a list of lines. But again, we have this line break here after the first line. And also we can use for loop to go over all the lines. Here you can see that I just call out for line in f, and f is the name of this file we opened, or not the name, or f is the object, or the file opened in this line. So we open the file, put it into f variable basically, and from this f variable we can loop over it and get every line with each iteration. And here you can also see that I print out the first line and then I print out the second line, and we have one empty line here, and I will talk about it soon. So as I mentioned, the line break is also part of the line. And when we read a line, the line break is the last symbol on this line. And as I showed you before, if I read one line from this file, I end up with having this line break inside this line or in this variable. If I really want to get rid of this, I can use, for example, strip method, which removes leading and trailing spaces and tabs and line breaks. So, for example, I can call out this strip from this read line result. So basically, the read line gives me a string, and string has strip method, and then if I apply the string method, I get a new string where the line break is removed. But let's see it also in code. So I have this numbers.txt here. So this is the same contents I had in my slides. And here we can see that there is one line with numbers and the second line with numbers. The second line does not have this line break here currently. And let's write a code how to read this file. So with open, here I put name of the file I want to open and as f. This can be whatever. This is basically a variable. I can write file here, for example. And now I can do a file. Let's put it into a variable line and file.read line. And let's read the second line also, read line. And let's just print out line and let's print out line 2. So I will run this code. And as you can see, there's the empty line here. Why is there an empty line? Print itself by default adds a line break after we print something. So for example, if I print out text hello, what happens is that it prints out this hello and adds a line break here. So the cursor basically is on the second line now. And now everything I print out starts from this point where the cursor is. And this happens with this line also. So I print out the line, but because the line itself contains a line break, then additional line break is added by the print function. So let's see what's happening here. So we have a file which has 1, space, 2, 3, and 4. And now it has 5 here, and so on. For us, the line break is visible, but inside the file, it's basically one symbol. So this is one symbol, this is one symbol, and so on. And also this line break here is one symbol. And it's usually indicated as \n, new line. And this is actually what is read when we read this line. So basically the first line contains this line break also here. And now what happens if I print it out? It prints out the contents of this line. So it prints out 1, 2, 3, 4, and this is space here. And it also adds this line break here. So basically I write it as that. But basically I can say that my cursor is here, so the next thing should start from here. But because the print also adds a line break, so that's why the cursor actually ends up here. And now if I print out the second line, it comes here, 5, 6, 7, 8. Because the second line doesn't have a line break. If I see the file, there is no line break. This is the end of the file. Then we don't have this line break here, and only the print line break is put here. But yeah, if I, for example, if I add enter here and write it out, and let's put something here also, so print end, I can see that there is also one empty line here. So that happens again here, that we have this line break. The string itself ends here, and now the print makes an additional line break here. So that's why we have empty lines here. But if I don't like those empty lines, I can always use, for example, strip here. Basically, what I can do is that line strip will be put into the same variable. So basically, this one gives me a string into line variable, and from this variable, I call out strip method. So the string has this method strip and it is applied, which means that the line break is removed from this. So what happens after strip is that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's the end of the string. So here I had a string like this, here I have a string like that. But also you have to know that the strip itself doesn't change the string, it gives me a new string. That's why I have to store this into a variable again. I overwrite the same variable here. And instead of reading lines, I can do, for example, lines will become file read lines. So it reads every line into a list. And now let's print out these lines. And now I can see that I have one line ending with this line break and the second line also ending with the line break. Maybe I change this line break here because then the examples in the slide are the same. So here the first line has this line break, the second one does not because the file ends after this 8. And I can also loop over for line in file, and I can print out every line in my file. And here I also have those empty lines because I don't use strip. If I do it here, then I will have more compact way of printing those out. So there are no empty lines because I remove this line break before printing this line out. Okay, so in often cases we have contents in the file which require us special symbols. What is a special symbol? This is a different topic, but let's say we use different encoding. For example, UTF-8. This is one standard which allows us, for example, use Estonian letters, Cyrillic letters, and so on. And default encoding, if you open a file, can be different. So it depends on your operating system and so on. But usually it's different. It doesn't, by default, read and write Unicode and then different symbols. And in order to specify the encoding, we can tell the open function to use specific encoding. For example, here I have said that let's use this encoding. Also, I have pointed out that there is additional argument here, which is R, which means reading. And later on we will see that I want to use writing. I want to open the file for writing, then I add a W here and so on. But yeah, basically you can omit this R if you are reading the file. All my examples didn't have this argument there. Okay, and I can show you what happens. So for example, let's say I have this file of numbers and I write a, let's write own here, which is apple in Estonian. And now if I print it out, I get a strange symbol here. This is basically one symbol in a file, but it reads it in a different way or different encoding, and then it gets a different understanding of this symbol. The topic of encoding and Unicode and so on is a separate thing. You can read more about it, but to make it short, we can just specify that we will use encoding here, encoding, and let's use UTF-8. Now if I run the same code, I get exactly the same symbol as is in the file. So often I would say this encoding is default in most of the cases. For example, if I write code or if I write the text file, all the editors usually have this as the default format. Why Python doesn't have it as a default format, this is a question itself, but basically you have to know that you have to specify this encoding to be sure that all the symbols are the same as meant in the file. This goes also for writing the files. Okay, and now to write into file. So we first have to specify W in where we open the file. So usually we didn't write anything here, or we can write R, which is reading, but now we write W here, so this means writing. And I've also added encoding here, and then I write few texts into a file. I will use the same code here. Let's write those here, and I will write them into result.txt. Now if I execute it, nothing is printed out because I don't print anything out. It's just writing into file and it's done. There is no error, so basically I can say that it probably succeeded. I will open this result. And now, as you can see, we have those two words, hello and world, but they are glued together. So that's the thing with writing into file. You also have to manually add line breaks. So if I want to have them in the separate lines, I can add this line break here. You can also see that this symbol, or this \n, a special symbol, is colored differently. So it's basically giving us a hint that this is something special. Now if I execute this code, as you saw, I didn't have this file before. So if I use file for writing, or if I open it for writing, then the file is created. And now if I execute it again, the same file is overwritten. So basically all the contents are deleted and the new contents are being written into a file. So, and now if I open this file, result.txt, I see that I have this hello and world on the different lines, which is probably what I would like to do. So yeah, the results in the file is as follows. The hello world is in one line. If I want to have them on separate lines, then I just have to add this \n, and now I have the hello world in two different lines. If I want to write multiple lines, there are, for example, a method, writeLines, which writes basically multiple strings into a file from the list. So it doesn't write multiple lines, depends on whether you have those line breaks or not. It basically writes multiple strings into a file. So if I have, let's take this same example, and just overwrite this one here and execute this. I also have this hello and world, and I just have it as a list. And now I can pass this list on to this writeLines method. And if I open the file, I can see that the hello world is again glued together. So if I want to have line break somewhere, I can add it, for example, here. And now if I execute the code, I can see that the hello world, those two strings are on separate lines. Then often what you want to do is that it's really annoying to add those new lines here. So let's say we have more words here, by, and so on. It's really annoying to add those line breaks. Of course, you can maybe write a separate function which loops over the string and puts line break after every string. That's one way to do it. But then we can also use a nice string method called join. And what the join does, so I just write, now I just use write, not writeLines, but write. And write writes one string into a file. And what we can do, we can have a special symbol. For example, I can currently add space here, and I can call out method join. So what happens is that this one is joined, or every element inside this join method is glued together with this space currently. So if I write data here and execute it, I can see that all those texts are separated by space. But instead of space, I can use new line here. So this is a new line symbol, and every element inside this data is glued together using this symbol. And as I can see, I have now 3 lines in my file. Also, you have to know that this list here, it has to contain strings. If I have a, let's say, number here, I will get an error because it only expects to have strings inside this list. If you really have numbers, then you probably want to go over the list and cast them into strings, for example, using str method or function. But yeah, usually you have already strings, so that's a different topic, how to convert strings into ints into strings. But if you really have numbers, so let's have a numbers and something like that, and I want to write numbers into a file. So currently I get an error because I have numbers there, so I can probably have a separate loop to loop over the elements of numbers and write a new list which has string versions of those numbers. For example, for number in numbers, let's have a numbers strings. It's a new list, and I will add into this new list str of this number. So every number is taken from this numbers list in this loop, and it's cast or it's changed into string, and then it is put into this list. And now I can write this list of strings into a file, and everything works. And now if I see this result file, I see that I have lines of numbers there. Yes, the same example. So now we saw that how to read file, how to write into a file, but if we use this W, the file is always overwritten. But if we want to add new information into the file, we can use a or append argument when opening the file. And now, if the file doesn't exist, it is still created, the same as with W, but if we use this append, we just add everything into the end of the file. So let's see, I have this one here, 1, 2, 3, and I will add a here. And now everything I write is appended to this file, and if I see that there are new contents. The 1 is on the same line because in the end of the file I didn't have line break. So often it's wise to have the line break in the end of the file, depending on your requirements, of course. But now currently the problem here is that my contents, what I'm writing here, are those 3 numbers without leading or trailing new line. So basically I have 1, 2, 3, or not exactly, not exactly, I have those line breaks here. And now I append, this is the contents of the file, now I append the same contents here. And 3. So that's why we have those on the same line. So my possibility, if I really wanted to have them on different lines, I can change my code so that my code would have, why it's so hard to write this backslash. I have this backslash n after the last symbol or last number. So basically just I can, for example, add here, separate backslash n. Let's try to fit it into the screen. And now if I run it several times, I can see that starting from some point I have those three numbers all on different lines. So if I append this hello, I will end up having several hellos in my file. So using this with statement, if I use this with statement, the good thing is that the file which I open is closed automatically, even if there is an exception. So for example, let's say that I want to write several things into a file. I open it for writing, I write something on one line, then I do some calculations, write something on the next line, and so on. And if something happens, for example, I get an exception or error, it might happen that everything I have written so far is deleted from the file, or it's not written at all. So it depends on the operating system a bit and so on, so how they deal with a file which is being written, but then it's unexpectedly closed. Then what happens to this file, whether it's deleted, whether it remains as is, and so on. But the code itself without the with statement is as follows. So basically we use the same function open, which has the same argument, so the file name and then the mode, or how do we what do we do with this file, whether we read or write, and then I put it into a variable file. And then I can call out this write method or read method or whatever, and also I have this close method here. And then I have to do this try and finally things, which are exception handling basically. So I try to do something, and if error happens or if it doesn't happen, I manually have to close the file. So basically if I open the file, I have to close it. And instead of those 5 lines, I can use with, and then I only have 2 lines. And they do exactly the same thing. So we open the file for writing, and then we try to write something into a file. And if something happens, we can be sure that the file is closed also. Also, what you have to be aware of is that if you open the file, for example, for writing, and then at the same time want to have the same file open for reading, then you probably can have unexpected results, because also the written part might not be still already in the file, and you can read the earlier results, or you cannot open it at all. So it also depends on the situation. But usually you open it for reading or you open it for writing. If you want to do both, then you have to be aware that there can be different situations if you want to read and write the same file at the same time. Usually it's wise to, if you write, you close it after writing, and then you can read it as you want. There is nothing special can happen during the reading. So you can read if the program, I don't know, gets an error or there is an exception, nothing special happens to this file. But if you are writing the file and something happens to the program, you have to be sure that the contents are written. Otherwise you will end up with kind of, I don't know, empty file or file which has only part of the contents it has to have, and so on. Also, one thing maybe I would like to point out is that if we read the file, let's read the same numbers here. It doesn't matter that I write something into a separate file, but I showed you that we have this text. We have this method read. By default, if I don't specify anything, it reads the whole contents. So if I execute it, it prints out the whole contents of the file. But I can also specify how many bytes or how many symbols it reads. Now if I read it and print it out, I only get this one here. So this says that read only one symbol from the file. let's read 3, then I get 1 space and 2. So this is basically this part of the file, 1, 2, 3. So that's the 3 indicating to the 3 symbols read here. And now, if I, for example, read a line, file read line, and print out the line, you can see that the line is not the whole line, but actually the rest of the line, which was not read yet. So basically what happens is, during the reading, everything you read, the cursor or the point where the reading is taken place, it's also moved with the reading. So currently the cursor is here, and if I read or whatever I do, if I just use the same read method or read line, it starts from here. And if it, for example, read line, then it ends after this line break. So basically it's the same as here, and then the next reading is done from the second line. So if I print out, for example, read 1 symbol from file.read, I should get 5 here, because everything else was already read, and the 5 is the next thing after the current position. And now also, if I have read this 5, the position moves with 1, or yeah, one position. So often you might get problems with this if you want to read it separately, but usually, most of the times, you just read the whole contents of the file, whether you use just read or read lines or loop over the file. But yeah, the same goes with the writing. So if you write something, the cursor or the position of the next writing starts where the last writing ended. So that's the thing with the files. You cannot really simply just jump from here to here and so on. There are ways to do that, but yeah, that's a different topic. Okay, but this one covers the main ideas behind file reading and writing. And if you have some more specific requirements, then you can look them up. But yeah, with that you can basically read anything and you can write basically anything you want. Thank you.